Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the sprawling, vibrant, and let's be honest, sometimes incredibly messy 250-year evolution of American media. We're going to look at how the foundation of the press didn't just report the news, but actively constructed our modern political and social reality. From the ink-stained printing presses of the colonial era, right up to the pixelated, algorithm-driven feeds we're all scrolling through today, this is the story of how information builds a nation. Let's get right into it.
But before we hit rewind, let me ask you something you've probably wondered about while checking your daily newsfeed. Has the media always been this chaotic? I mean, we constantly hear about sensationalism, extreme partisanship, fake news, you name it. It is so easy to look around right now and assume that this completely polarized, frenetic media landscape is just a modern phenomenon, right? Something entirely driven by smartphones and the internet.
Well, the short answer is absolutely yes. For literally 250 years, the media has always been this chaotic. Chaos, intense partisanship, and fiery debate are quite literally baked right into the DNA of this country's print history. As we go through this, you're going to see that the fierce battles we're fighting today online have some seriously uncanny parallels to the arguments echoing through the cobblestone streets of the 18th century.
Section 1. The Power of Pamphlets.
To really understand how we got here, we've got to start at the very beginning. We need to see how early media functioned, not as some detached, neutral observer, but as a formidable, grassroots political weapon during the American Revolution. When we talk about revolutionary media, absolutely nothing compares to Thomas Paine's pamphlet, Common Sense, which dropped in January of 1776. Honestly, think of this as the viral tweet of the 18th century. It was incredibly accessible, highly disruptive, and it completely bypassed all the traditional gatekeepers of information. Paine didn't use dense, aristocratic language. No, he used plain, passionate words to directly attack the monarchy and make the case for independence. He was speaking directly to the everyday colonist.
And to put the sheer scale of this disruption into perspective, consider this. Up to 500,000 copies of Common Sense were sold. 500,000. Now, context is everything here. The entire population of the colonies at that time was only about 2.5 million people. That means nearly 1 in 5 people actually owned a copy. And because these pamphlets were constantly being read aloud in taverns and town squares, its actual reach was massive. It was a true viral sensation that transformed colonial unrest into a unified Republican vision.
You see, before pamphlets came along, political discourse was basically dominated by elite treatises. These were dense, highly philosophical, super expensive, and targeted exclusively at aristocrats. Revolutionary pamphlets like Paine's completely flipped that script. They were plain-spoken, very affordable, and targeted straight at the masses. This incredible democratization of information meant that, really for the very first time, the average person was explicitly invited into the political debate. The medium itself was the revolution.
Section 2. The Partisan Press Era and Freedom versus State Authority. So once the revolution was actually won, the printing presses didn't just cool down and go back to normal. In fact, they basically overheated as they became deeply entangled with the formation of the brand new government. If we trace the timeline from Common Sense in 1776, we see the absolute necessity of an independent press leading directly to the First Amendment in 1791, boldly protecting press freedom. But look how fast that protection was put to the test. By 1798, we get the Sedition Acts, which we'll unpack in a second, leading right up to the massive commercial boom of the penny press in 1833. This entire period was just a relentless tug of war between a newly formed state trying to maintain order and a press fiercely demanding the right to criticize it.
Now here is a massive takeaway for you. Early American newspapers were political actors. They were not neutral observers. If you picked up a paper in the early 1800s, you were definitely not looking for objective journalism. These papers were often directly subsidized by political parties. Major figures, we're talking Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, they explicitly used partisan newspapers to aggressively attack their opponents and frame public debates. The press was essentially a literal battlefield for ideological supremacy.
And naturally, all that intense partisanship led to some pretty serious friction with the government. Passed by the Federalist Adams administration during a time of high national anxiety, the Alien and Sedition Acts of 1798 actually criminalized false, scandalous, and malicious writing against the government. So what happened in practice? Well, opposition journalists were targeted, they were fined, and some were even thrown in jail. It was a profound early test of the First Amendment, and it really highlights a delicate tension that we still fiercely debate today, finding the exact balance between national security and the fundamental right to free speech. The government pushed back hard, proving that the ideals of a free press are almost always contested in reality.
Section 3. Imagining the nation.
As the 19th century progressed, the press did something even more profound than just arguing about politics. It actually began to weave together the cultural fabric of the United States. The scholar Benedict Anderson called this concept imagined communities. Think about it. A nation is simply way too large for everyone to ever meet face to face. So how do millions of totally disconnected people, scattered across vast geographies, actually feel American? Well, they feel it because that identity is socially constructed. It happens when people consume mass media, when they are reading the exact same words at the exact same time.
The mechanics behind this print capitalism were genuinely revolutionary. First, you have new technologies like steam presses, which drastically lowered production costs. That meant publishers could pump out massive volumes of material on the cheap, and that allowed for simultaneous consumption. Suddenly, a merchant in New York, a blacksmith up in Boston, and a farmer in Pennsylvania are all reading the exact same news, the same serial fiction, and the same cultural critiques on the exact same morning. This daily shared ritual forged a collective national identity. Diverse regions and classes were unified into one shared social reality. The media wasn't just reflecting the nation, it was literally helping to invent it.
Section 4. The penny press revolution.
Then, the 1830s hit, bringing a massive commercial boom that permanently altered the economics, the audience, and the very content of American media. Notice the stark paradigm shift here. The old elite partisan press cost a hefty 6 cents, was packed with dry political treatises, and targeted affluent elites. But then comes the disruptor, the penny press. It cost just a single cent. It was filled with crime stories, local news, and human interest pieces. And its target audience? The rapidly growing urban working class and immigrants arriving in droves. News was absolutely no longer a luxury good. It was officially a mass market commodity.
The dam finally broke in 1833. That's when Benjamin Day launched the New York Sun. By pricing his paper at just 1 penny, he made news accessible to absolutely everyone navigating the frenetic, crowded streets of the city. Immigrants could use it to learn English and figure out their new home, while the working class finally felt seen by the local stories. This really marked the definitive birth of modern journalism, shifting the power dynamic away from elite political readers straight to a massive, diverse urban audience.
But here's the thing. To make a paper that cheap, the underlying business model had to completely transform. Subscriptions were out, an advertising model was in. And to attract those advertisers, you needed a massive audience. To capture that audience, reporters started hitting the streets, pioneering on-the-ground investigative reporting about everyday urban life. The papers were then distributed by incredibly energetic newsboys, practically shouting the headlines on street corners. But here is the catch. Because profitability relied entirely on capturing and holding people's attention, sensationalism absolutely skyrocketed. Editors leaned heavily into scandal, crime, and gossip just to maximize their circulation. So, it was profoundly democratizing, bringing news to the masses for sure, but it also pioneered a model where engagement was valued over pure information. Does that sound a little familiar?
Conclusion: the DNA of modern media.
Looking back at this whole journey, there's a profound quote from the source text that I really want you to reflect on. The press was both a partner in democracy and an actor in partisan power struggles. That perfectly encapsulates the complex, dual nature of the media over the last 250 years. It is an absolutely essential tool for holding power accountable and informing the public. Yet it is simultaneously a business driven by attention and a battleground for competing political agendas. It has never been just a mirror, it is a mold.
So I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. How did today's digital algorithms mirror the penny press sensationalism of the 1830s? When your social media feed is actively prioritizing outrage, scandal, and viral engagement just to keep your eyeballs glued to the screen for advertisers, is it really so different from a 19th century newsboy shouting sensational headlines on a New York street corner? The ink-stained presses of the past perfectly parallel the pixelated feeds of today. The technology has evolved, sure, but the human drivers of American media, they remain exactly the same. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible history, and definitely keep this all in mind the next time you scroll through your daily news.